When Tom Patterson walked into the shelter that morning, he wasn't planning to adopt a cat. He definitely wasn't planning to adopt this cat. "Are you sure about this one?" the shelter worker asked nervously, glancing at the orange tabby. "He's been returned 3 times already. He's different." But there was something about those eyes, something that made Tom unable to look away. The worker's warning should have been a red flag, but instead it only made him more curious. What Tom didn't know was that this mysterious cat would turn his entire world upside down and reveal something that no one could have predicted. What made this cat so special that 3 families had already returned him? And why was the shelter so nervous about letting him go? Tom Patterson hadn't planned on visiting the shelter that day. In fact, he hadn't planned much of anything since Sophie died. 6 months had passed since the funeral, but their house still felt frozen in time. Her coffee mug still sat in the dish rack, her reading glasses still perched on the nightstand. Even the grocery list on the fridge was still in her handwriting. The last thing he needed was a cat. Their old cat had passed away years ago, and though Sophie had often talked about getting another one, they never did. There was always some reason to wait, a vacation coming up, or renovations planned. Now those excuses seemed so meaningless, but something had drawn him to the shelter that morning. Maybe it was the way the autumn light hit the windows, reminding him of how Sophie used to love this time of year. Or maybe it was something else entirely. The orange tabby sat in the corner, separate from the other cats. While the others played or slept in patches of sunlight, this one sat perfectly still, watching. Just watching. His tail moved in an odd rhythm, tap tap, pause tap, exactly like Sophie used to drum her fingers when she was thinking deeply about something. "His name is Rusty," the shelter worker said, noticing Tom's interest. There was something in her voice. Hesitation? Concern? "He's been here a while. Maybe I could show you some of our other cats." But Tom couldn't look away from those eyes. They seemed to look straight through him, knowing and intense. Almost like they recognized him. "Why has he been here so long?" Tom asked, still watching the cat. The worker shifted uncomfortably. "Well, he's been adopted 3 times actually, but he always gets returned." "Returned? Why?" "The family said he made them uncomfortable. He has some unusual behaviors." This should have been a warning sign. 3 families had already decided this cat was too strange to keep, but instead of deterring Tom, it only made him more curious. What could be so odd about this ordinary-looking orange tabby? The first few days with Rusty were surprisingly normal. He used his litter box perfectly, ate his food without fuss, and seemed to settle in quickly. Maybe too quickly, as if he already knew where everything was. Then the strange things began. It started with breakfast. Every morning at exactly 8 a.m., Rusty would sit in Sophie's old chair at the dining table. Not on it, in it, the same way she used to sit, with perfect posture, facing Tom's usual spot. The first time could have been coincidence. The second time was odd. By the 5th day, Tom's hands shook as he poured his coffee. Sophie had always been a creature of habit. Breakfast at 8 a.m. sharp, every single day of their 32 years together. Even on vacation she'd maintain her schedule. "Life needs its rhythms," she would say. Sophie's piano sat untouched since her death, gathering dust in the corner of the living room. Tom couldn't bear to sell it, but he couldn't bear to hear it played either. Until Rusty arrived. The cat would sit beside it for hours, meowing in a way that almost seemed mournful. Sometimes in the middle of the night, Tom would wake to the sound of that crying and find Rusty pawing at the piano bench. One particularly sleepless night, after hours of Rusty's persistent meowing, Tom finally sat down at the piano. His fingers trembled as they touched the keys. As the first notes of Sophie's favorite song filled the room, Rusty jumped onto the bench beside him, purring loudly. It was the first time Tom had played since Sophie died. But was it all just coincidence? Was his grief making him see patterns that weren't really there? The real questions began when Rusty started finding things. Sophie's things. Things that had been lost or forgotten. First it was the photo album in the attic, one Tom didn't even know existed. Rusty spent days pawing at the attic door, until Tom finally investigated, discovering an album full of photos from their first year of marriage. Then came the ring incident. Sophie's wedding ring had gone missing 2 years before she died. They'd torn the house apart looking for it, but it never turned up. One evening, Rusty began scratching at a specific floorboard in their bedroom. When Tom lifted it, there was the ring caught in a gap between the boards. How had Rusty known where to look? Tom started doing research. He contacted the previous families who had adopted Rusty, needing to know what had made them return him. Their stories were eerily similar. He would stare at empty corners for hours, one woman said, and react to things that weren't there. He knew things he shouldn't have known, another family reported. Like which chair belonged to our grandmother before she passed. He would sit there every day at the same time she used to have her afternoon tea. The third family had returned him after just 2 days. He kept leading us to our son's old room, the mother explained, her voice shaking. We lost him last year. We just couldn't handle it. Tom's mind raced with possibilities. Was Rusty simply an unusually perceptive cat, or was there something more mysterious at work? The answer came on a quiet Sunday afternoon, exactly 6 months after he'd adopted Rusty. Tom was sorting through Sophie's closet, finally ready to donate some of her clothes. Rusty sat in the doorway, watching intently as Tom pulled out sweater after sweater. Then suddenly the cat's behavior changed. Rusty's ears perked up and his tail started moving in that familiar rhythm, tap, tap, pause, tap. He stared intently at a spot near the window, then looked back at Tom, then at the spot again. The air in the room felt different somehow, heavier. And then Tom smelled it, Sophie's perfume, not from the clothes. This was fresher, as if she had just walked past. The same scent that used to linger in the air when she came home from work. Rusty got up and walked to the empty spot by the window, rubbing against something Tom couldn't see, purring loudly. The cat's fur was pressed in places, as if being petted by an invisible hand. In that moment Tom understood why the shelter had been so hesitant about Rusty, why 3 families had returned him. This wasn't just any cat. Rusty could see things others couldn't, or rather people others couldn't. The realization should have been terrifying. Instead, Tom felt an overwhelming sense of peace. All those coincidences, the breakfast routine, the piano, finding Sophie's ring, they hadn't been coincidences at all. Sophie was still there, in her own way. And Rusty could see her. The final piece of evidence came a week later. Tom was going through old papers when he found Sophie's last letter to him, written from the hospital. There was a line he'd somehow missed before. "If I find a way to stay close to you, I will, and if I do, I'll find a way to let you know." Tom looked at Rusty, who sat watching him with those knowing eyes. The cat blinked slowly, then got up and walked to Sophie's chair, assuming his usual breakfast position. It was exactly 8 a.m. Years have passed since that day at the shelter. Rusty still sits in Sophie's chair every morning at 8 a.m. He still leads Tom to forgotten mementos and memories. And sometimes, in quiet moments, Tom catches a whiff of Sophie's perfume as Rusty purrs at something only he can see. The shelter had warned him about this cat, but they could never have explained why. Some things in life defy explanation. Sometimes the most extraordinary comfort comes in the most ordinary package, like an orange tabby cat with mysterious eyes and a tendency to get returned to the shelter. Tom never remarried. He didn't need to. His house doesn't feel empty anymore. After all, he shares it with 2 souls, one he can see and one he can only feel. And every morning at breakfast, as he watches Rusty sitting in Sophie's chair, he smiles, knowing that love finds a way to stay, even when we can't see it.